dialing in. We're not muted. We're just waiting for everyone to join us today, and then we'll get started with the event.
It looks like we've plateaued. Why don't you go ahead and start, Grace?
Thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. Welcome to an hour of great literature. My name is Grace, and I'm the events producer at University Bookstore in Seattle, Washington. Let us know where you're zooming in from the chat. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you and your loved ones are staying safe during the pandemic period. We're sending our hope that things improve soon and steadily. University Bookstore is the oldest independent bookstore in the Pacific Northwest region. In fact, we're celebrating our 121st anniversary this year, and we are grateful for the support of book lovers like you for helping us weather this pandemic. Today, we're honored to celebrate the paperback launch of The Mountain Sing by Dr. Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai, a powerful voice in fiction and simply a phenomenal person. This event is even more special to our store and to me for another reason, so please forgive me for talking a little bit about that before I launch into the introductions. A year ago, we were getting ready to host Quế Mai for the publication of The Mountain Sing when the pandemic hit. Just like that, the whole world was turned upside down, and Quế Mai became our first attempt at a virtual author event in the form of a video she graciously recorded for our social media channels. Since then, I, like many of you who are watching, have probably gotten to know Quế Mai on social media, and we've kept in touch. I've come to see the incredible and compassionate person that she is, as she tirelessly champions other authors, new and well-established both, independent bookstores and booksellers, stands up for global civil rights issues, and has always had an encouraging word for all who are lucky to know her. That is why we at our store have been looking forward to this event for months. We've hosted countless authors virtually over the year, but she will always be the first one and holds a very special place in our hearts. So thank you so much for being here. Quế Mai is an award-winning writer in both Vietnamese and English. Her 8 books of poetry, short fiction, and nonfiction in Vietnamese have received some of Vietnam's top literary awards, including the 2010 Poetry of the Year Award from the Hanoi Writers Association. Her debut novel and first book in English, The Mountain Sing, is an international bestseller, winner of the 2020 BookBrowse Best Debut Award, winner of the 2020 Lannan Literary Award Fellowship for contribution to peace and reconciliation, and winner of the Bloggers Book Prize 2021. Quế Mai currently divides her time between Indonesia and Vietnam and graduated with her PhD in creative writing in 2020. Today, she'll be in conversation with another of my favorite authors, Megha Majumdar. I met Megha at a booksellers conference at the start of 2020, again right before lockdown. I thought she was wonderful, intelligent, and kind from the moment we met, and an entire year of getting to know her as well has cemented my first impressions. Megha is the author of the New York Times bestseller and editor's choice, A Burning. She was born and raised in Kolkata, India. She moved to the United States to attend college at Harvard University, followed by graduate school in social anthropology at Johns Hopkins University. She works as an editor at Catapult and lives in New York City. A Burning is her first book. And we will also be hosting Megha this summer for the paperback launch of A Burning, so please follow University Bookstore on social media for all the most recent updates on that as well. Throughout the event, we'll be posting links to purchase both The Mountain Sing and A Burning. And coincidentally, both are staff favorites of mine at University Bookstore, and all of those who have read or will be reading both books will definitely understand why. We have beautiful signed book plates for The Mountain Sing to include with your purchase. Just a few things before we get started. We'll post the link to the book through the chat periodically, as I mentioned. This event is being recorded and will be on University Bookstore's YouTube channel in 2 to 3 days. And if you have any questions for this authors, please put them in the Q&A field in your Zoom screens for the end of the discussion portion. And now I will bring our authors onto the stage for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you so much, Grace. You know, I'm in tears. I wrote The Mountain Sing without an agent, without knowing it would ever be published. I ventured into English, writing it with my dictionary, and I can't believe that I'm here. And I would not be here without champions like you, without readers, without friends like Megha, I would not be here without the wonderful literary community, and I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much for being here and for the honor of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Hi, Quế Mai. I feel like I missed a few minutes because my Wi-Fi cut out. I'm so sorry about that, but fingers crossed I'm back and the Wi-Fi won't do that again. I gather you were just kind of doing an introduction.
So Grace was doing an introduction of both of us, and she was saying how wonderful a person you are, and your book is her is like a star favorite in her bookstore.
Oh.
And I need to begin by telling you how much I love your book, and I need to read you. I want to show you. This is a post from my editor, Betsy Clark at Algonquin Books. She's the greatest person and a great editor. Not only she reads manuscript, to purchase for Algonquin Books, she reads all the authors as well. And she said, I try to read without knowing too much of what this book, A Burning, is about. I will just say that this novel is shattering and timely. I knew it would be good, but I had no idea how good. So
that is very kind.
All of you out there, you all need to get a copy of A Burning. It's so beautiful, so good. And you said I've watched several of your interviews, and you said you wanted to write a book which is both profound and entertaining, and you achieved it. Exactly that, so entertaining. And it's so deep and so profound. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Quế Mai. You're very kind, and so is Betsy. I am so grateful. But we're here to celebrate your book. So for everybody watching, we're here to celebrate The Mountain Sing, which is out in paperback, which is a book that broke my heart, and it showed me so much about one family's love and sacrifice and what their hard-won joy looks like. It's a book that will really stay with me for such a long time, and I'm far from the only person who feels that way. I think it has received praise from icons like Viet Thanh Nguyen and Ocean Vuong, and it was a New York Times Book Review editor's choice. So if you haven't read it yet, I hope you'll get it tonight. Did you want to read for a couple minutes and introduce the book in your own words, Quế Mai?
Okay, let me get a copy of my book.
Okay.
Oh, then I can show you that I'm wearing an outside, you see?
That's gorgeous.
Because sometimes I do events virtual event without wearing pants, but I'm actually wearing my pants today. So, yeah, so I wrote The Mountain Sing during 7 years. So, I was a writer in Vietnamese language first, and then I began to see the need to translate Vietnamese literature, because I felt like, a lot of the international readers know Vietnam mainly as a war. And I wanted to introduce Vietnam, beyond that. I wanted to introduce Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese poetry, Vietnamese literature, the complexity, of our, family relations, and the long-lasting impact of all of these historical events. So I ventured into writing. I wanted to translate a novel, a Vietnamese novel at first, but then one day I thought, why don't I write it? So it was the most crazy idea. I quit my full-time job and stay home and write. But I had so many moments of crisis because I had no idea if anyone would want to read this book, and I'm so grateful that it is here. Okay, so maybe I will read the beginning of the book.
Mm-hmm.
The Tallest Mountain, Hanoi, 2012. My grandmother used to tell me that when our ancestors die, they don't just disappear, they will continue to watch over us. And now I feel her watching me as I light a match, setting fire to 3 sticks of incense. On the ancestral altar, behind the wooden bell and plates of steaming food, my grandma's eyes glow as an orange-blue flame springs up, consuming the incense. I shake the incense to put out the fire. As it smolders, curtains of smoke and fragrance spiral toward heaven, calling spirits of the dead to return. Bà ơi, I whisper, raising the incense above my head. Through the mist veiling the border between our two worlds, she smiles at me. I miss you, Grandma. A breeze gusts through the open window, holding my face like Grandma's hands once did. Huong, my beloved granddaughter, the trees outside my window rustle her words. I'm here with you always. I set the incense into the bowl in front of Grandma's portrait. Her gentle features radiate in the incense perfume. I stare at the scars on her neck. Remember what I said, darling? Her voice murmurs on the restless branches. The challenges faced by Vietnamese people throughout history are as tall as the tallest mountains. If you stand too close, you won't be able to see their peaks. Once you step away from the currents of life, you will have the full view. You know, so when I was born, both of my grandmothers had died. So I was really jealous of friends who had grandmas to tell them stories, you know. So I told myself as a child, one day I would write a book with a grandmother figure in it. So I would have a grandma. So you know, so I need to thank, you know, like I have to thank my publisher, Algonquin Books, for giving me a grandma by publishing this book, and my agent, Julie Stevenson. You know, without my editor, Betsy Clyde and Julie Stevenson, I would not be here. And I watched one of the events, you acknowledge how you acknowledge your agent, right? And your editors. And I think a lot of authors have, you know, we as authors, we have our names on the front covers of the book, but I feel like, you know, our editor should be there too, right? So much for us, yes. And you are an editor too, and I really admire you, how you champion other people's work too. I mean, you are incredible.
Thank you, Quế Mai. I love how you keep trying to derail the conversation by talking about me. But I really love that you read the opening of the book, because it introduces the two main characters, the two main voices in this book, who are a grandmother and a granddaughter. How did you arrive at these two characters, and what was it like inhabiting these two voices?
Oh, thank you. So I had the idea of having a grandmother in the novel, and I knew I would have the honor of the privilege of being a granddaughter, and and I think, you know, and to write these two voices, you know, Huong's experiences come from some of my personal experiences, but I think because Huong, you know, Huong is born before me, and she lived through the war. And for me, you know, I was born 2 years before the war ended, so my experiences are not the same. So I talked to a lot of people who experienced those events. And, for the character of Grandma Dieu Lan, I interviewed for this book, I interviewed hundreds of people, and I love the elderly women of Vietnam. They are the keepers of Vietnamese history, of all the keepers of our untold stories. And I think they are very much willing to tell us the stories if we are willing to listen to them. And I felt like, I learned so much during my research process, at the generosity of the people who were willing to share with me their family histories, because they don't want them to be forgotten. So I think in crafting these characters needed research, needed understanding and empathy, but most of all, it needed a sense of imagination, because because I talked to so many people. So, for a while I was kind of, I was overwhelmed with the amount of research. I'm sure you did a lot of research for your book too. And, and I think at a stage we feel a huge burden of responsibility. How do we honor these memories? How do we honor the trust and faith of so many people who shared with us their personal stories? But, in the end, it's up to us to take all of that and build something, a world of imagination, right? And I feel like the work of a novelist is the job of is like the job of a gardener. Our research is like a garden, right, on which we grow a tree with our imagination. And and our plotting, our crafting of characters give the trunk and the branches and the leaves to the tree. And in the end, it's the reader's interactions with the book, that give flowers and fruit to the tree. And I really feel like, a book is dead if nobody reads it. It is alive if somebody reads it. And I was watching, an interview with an author the other day, and he said, for readers to read a book, they have to become vulnerable. They have to open up themselves to receive the stories and be a part of it, and be vulnerable. And for my book, the readers have to hurt the same way the characters are hurting, right?
Absolutely.
So the reader's time and involvement in a book is the greatest gift for us as writers. And I'm just so thankful to readers out there who are willing to become vulnerable, are willing to accept our stories and trust where we are going to take them with our storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're talking about the vulnerability of readers, because I think often what we do talk about is how a writer is vulnerable in writing something, but you are so right that a reader has to meet the book and kind of accept the invitation of the book. So there is kind of a meeting of two minds within a book. And I love that you talked about the garden, because it made me think about one of the things that I really love in the book is the texture you create with all the proverbs. So even though this is a book written in English, I felt like I was getting a small glimpse of the Vietnamese language, because there are so many beautiful sayings embedded within the language of this book, which is really beautiful. And the question that I want to ask you is actually, so there's the Vietnamese language, but there's also great love for foreign books. Huong, the granddaughter, is somebody who is constantly reading as much as she can books from other countries. I think she reads quite a few children's books from America. I was so curious about the place of children's books and storytelling as you bound it up within the texture of this book.
Traditionally, when I grew up, literature played a big role in my life, and I wanted to bring that importance that reflect the reflection on the importance of literature into the book. And because I also feel like nowadays we don't read enough. In Vietnam is becoming developing fast, and people abandon the love for literature. Before, we didn't have the internet, right? So people had more time for book and for real conversations. Nowadays people tend to spend a lot of more time on social media and less time for reading. And I want to hang on to that love of literature and the significance of literature in shaping our world, in shaping our beliefs, in advocating for peace, because I said in the mountain sing, if everyone is willing to read each other and see into the light of other cultures, there would be no war on earth. Because if it's in a war, all sides tend to dehumanize the other side, so, and to see the other side as the other. And if we read more, we empathize more, we put ourselves into other people's shoes, then we understand their experiences, their perspective, there would be much love on this earth and less wars. So I mean, traditionally Vietnamese people are great readers. Like, for example, I grew up, my parents were really poor, but our most valuable possession were a bookshelf. And I still have, my parents are still keeping these books, all the covers have fallen out because I read them so often. And my father cut out carton, and he made the hardcover for these books because I read them so often, the covers fell out. And also we did not have access to a bookstore. I wish I had, Grace as my bookseller at that time. Grace is so amazing. She does so much, and she brings so much diversity of literature to her bookstore. And we need more of these bookstores around the world. And in my hometown at that time, we had no book. I think there was a government bookstore, but there was there were not a lot of books at that time. And I dream about traveling, through books. So I was reading, books from several countries that were translated and published in Vietnam as well. So I wanted to highlight, the importance of literature, but also the importance of Vietnamese proverbs. If I am so thankful for Alan Quinn Books for publishing this novel with the authentic Vietnamese language, because normally when the Vietnamese language is published within the English text, it is stripped of all the diacritics. But my editor, Betsy, agreed with me that we will protect the complexity and beauty of the Vietnamese language. This book really decolonizes literature in English about Vietnam, because, it puts the Vietnamese people on an equal level with the Western reader. Because we challenge your privileges, we invite you to be a part of our culture, but we also challenge you, because I have like more than 20 characters in this book, and all of their names are with these critics, so they are difficult to remember. But if I challenge you, because when you accept our language, our culture, you show a certain degree of respect, towards us. You don't expect us to change our language to fit your, to please your ears and your eyes. So I think my editor and I made a decision to keep my name in, also Nguyễn Phan Quế Mai, in full, the critical marks. And I was thinking, could I sacrifice the accessibility of my novel if I keep all these marks? But in the end, I thought, I don't write this book for money. I write it with the need to tell stories from Vietnam, you know. And I want to honor my culture. I want to undo the loss we have suffered through hundreds of years of being occupied or being colonized. So I'm really grateful that, you know, to have supporters and readers and champions who appreciate and accept, you know, the Vietnamese language in this book. So thank you for noticing the proverbs.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the complexity of the book on every level. Absolutely. I love that you didn't sacrifice the truthfulness of the book at any stage. And there is so much that is so complex here, you know, from the details of how people survive, the ways in which the book kind of brings together stories of great hardship, stories, some of the stories which are quite hard to read, but also stories about the kindness of strangers in a time of crisis, and stories about great compassion and great generosity, even at a lot of personal risks. So the complexity of the characters, the complexity of the situation, all of it kind of filters down to the word level and to the diacritics, as you were talking about, and that is so beautiful. I want to ask you about, Agent Orange appears in this book, and it plays quite a significant role, and it's introduced in a chilling line where somebody says, I'm going to butcher this, but somebody says, oh, you know, here's this chemical agent. It has a beautiful name. It's called Agent Orange. And you recently wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, which is titled, America, Please Don't Forget the Victims of Agent Orange. Can you talk about that?
You know, I feel like the world moves on after a war and starts another war, without considering the tremendous impact we make on the environment, on human beings, on generations, you know, of people, with the war that we create. So Agent Orange is something which is still affecting millions of people in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And it's devastating that they are the forgotten victims. And I used to volunteer in an orphanage in Vietnam where there are many deformed children are kept. And if you look at these children, you must ask yourself, why are human beings so cruel to each other? Why are we so cruel to each other? Why don't we have any more compassion? Why don't we look at these children and say, let somebody do something? I am so angry at these chemical companies who are so rich. Monsanto is so rich. They benefited from the millions of gallons of Agent Orange which they produced and which was sprayed onto Vietnam, and they knew very, very well, you know, the toxicity of the chemical, right? But they produced, they sold it, and then now generations are suffering, and they don't do anything. You know, they don't admit their legal responsibility, but they don't even contribute to the cleanup operations in Vietnam. Can you believe that today in Vietnam, 46 years after the war, there are places still contaminated with Agent Orange? There's this largest hotspot in near Ho Chi Minh City, near our largest city in Bien Hoa. It's called Bien Hoa Airport. You know, this vast area is surrounded like by 100,000 families who live around that area, and that area have lakes that is so contaminated. You know, all the fish still have the toxin in their flesh, because Agent Orange does not dissolve with time. It stays in the soil. It stays at the bottom of lakes and rivers. You know, and so you know, people have been affected by that. I grew up eating fish, which was deformed because of Agent Orange. So, you know, for a while I was really scared. I was like counting the toes and fingers of my children because, you know, because by that time I had worked with the victims of Agent Orange, and I knew how much it affected, how deadly Agent Orange is. And I just wish the international community would do more for the victims of Agent Orange, not just in Vietnam, but Laos and Cambodia. You know, the mountainous areas of Vietnam along, you know, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where a lot of ethnic minority people live, was sprayed. And you know, these areas are not accessible. So you know, I was reading a report by USAID, the development agency of the American government, and they said, you know, these people living in the mountainous areas, they don't have access to services, to medical services. So the challenge is to help the victims in this area. And you know, like recently there has been some court cases, you know, and I mean, Vietnamese victims have been, you know, suing in the US, but their cases were dismissed. And recently, you know, a French Vietnamese woman, Mrs. Trần, brought the case to a French court, and it was dismissed as well. You know, I don't know until when, you know, we start recognize the suffering of millions of people in Laos, Vietnam, and Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. I think it is so late, and I'm just really upset about that. And I highlight the horror of Agent Orange in my novel, and I also talk about it again in my second novel, which I'm really excited about. It is also heartbreaking, but you know, in my second novel, I talk about Agent Orange when it is used during the war and after the war. So I document more of the impact of Agent Orange in that book.
When do we get to read your second English novel?
Oh, I am so excited to let you know that I have finished writing it, and my editor loves it, and I'm so over the moon.
That's incredible. Yeah. Congratulations. I'm so excited. We'll have another novel from you soon. Maybe I will ask one more question before turning things over to Grace, who I know has prepared lots of excellent questions for us. And I want to talk about the ways in which, you know, you just spoke so movingly about Agent Orange, and the book is incredibly complex, truthful, moving about war, and especially war experienced by different members of a family who all have quite different experiences. I was so fascinated that you chose to tell this story of war with no, you know, with no sugarcoating. I mean, there's a line in the book which goes, you know, a character saying, I have learned, again, I'm sorry to butcher this, but it's something like, I have learned that there's only one way to talk about war, and that is honestly. I was so struck by that. Can you talk about writing about war from the perspectives of two women?
Thank you. You remember the line really well. Thank you for reading it so closely. I'm really impressed. Thank you. So, you know, most narratives about wars are written by men, right? And I think, you know, I was looking at literature in English about Vietnam, and Vietnamese women are often portrayed as victims. You know, if you watch Miss Saigon, you know, you will see that Kim is like someone who needs to be rescued by an American soldier, and she has no agency, you know, and the truth is further away from that, you know. I think, and you know, in literature in English about Vietnam, normally, and especially in Hollywood movies, we are seen as backgrounds to men's or you know, the Western stories, that Vietnamese women are often, like represented as so weak, absent of agency, absent of trauma. So I wanted to write beyond that, write against that. And I think stories about wars by women add some perspectives into the narrative about wars. For example, we have we can add perspectives on family relations, right? And how wars and historical events affect family relations, and how how nature is devastated. Because I wanted to highlight the importance of nature, because Grandma Dieu Lan said, whenever humans fail us, nature can help save us. And in the book, I talked about the application of Vietnamese traditional medicine. I think in India, similar to India, in Vietnam, we believe in the healing power of nature through traditional medicine. And I think now a lot of people in the West are starting, to adopt, or our traditional medicines, like acupuncture is so effective too. And I think I grew up with traditional medicine, and in Vietnam, a lot of doctors combine the Eastern method and the traditional ways with the Western method to make the best use of both worlds. So I think because I wanted to reclaim our space in literature in terms of women voices. And and it was also fun to write, to give us, the agency, to give us strength, to say that we, the women, are the ones who save the men too.
Yeah.
Oh, and before we talk to Grace, I want to ask you, what book are you working on? I'm excited to read whatever you write next. I will read everything you write.
That is very gracious, Quế Mai. Thank you so much. I wish I could say I have finished another book. I am nowhere near it, but I'm working very, very slowly on another novel. I'm full of admiration that you've written another whole book already. That is incredible. And yeah, on that note, perhaps we should invite Grace back on screen.
Thank you both for such insightful and wonderful conversation. I have a few questions for both of you, and also to give our audience some time to put all of their questions in our Q&A field, and we will get to them very, very soon. My question first is for both of you. You're both writers in other formats first, and this was a debut novel. Can you give your audience a glimpse into your writing process? For example, what were the most rewarding moments while writing a novel, the most frustrating or difficult for you? And how is this process different from your previous writing projects?
Megha, you go first, please. I've been talking a lot.
Well, before I wrote A Burning, I had only written, kind of short stories, which I never really published. And so I think coming to the question for the book was the thing that gave me the discipline to write the book. Feeling that I wanted to write a book about how ordinary people hold on to big dreams in a time of hatred-filled nationalism. How does that work? What does that look like? What does a moral center look like? What does justice look like? How do we reframe success? So all of these questions brought me to the book and kind of gave me the determination to keep going. And then, I worked on it very slowly. I think that was part of what I came to accept, is that as somebody with a full-time job, I could just work on the book in tiny pieces, maybe an hour a day. And I just had to keep going.
Thank you.
Oh, and Megha, I am really excited about the second book you're writing. I need to ask you later on in private what it is about. But I really admire how you brought together all of these important political questions into this book. And you know, for me too, you know, I wanted to talk about broader issues that impact Vietnam until today. And I think that the most challenging part is to write about issues like the land reform or the Great Hunger or the impact of the Vietnam War, because I covered so many historical events of Vietnam, you know, the major events of the 20th century history. And I wanted to show the impact on one single family. So, you know, I mean, the challenge was how not to dump information, you know, how to, and I think my editor helped me a lot with that, because, you know, she was saying, you know, this felt like a lot of telling here. Maybe you could, she made some suggestions that was life-changing for me. And I, you know, then I went on and I cut a lot and I reshaped it. And but I think, you know, in the end, I think the most satisfying element of writing this book is the freedom to imagine, the freedom to fly, and you know, the magic, the moment when you are writing and magic appears. Because I don't plot when I write my books. Even for the second novel, I don't plot. And you know, the joy is like you sit down at your writing desk and your characters take you to places they want to show you, and they tell you, you know. And I don't know, because I write about things which are so haunting to me. I would, you know, there would be like moments at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, the characters are calling me. They are saying, get up and write. Our stories cannot sleep unless you tell them. So, you know, so this morning, actually, I was waking up at 4:30 because I'm thinking about my third book. I already started my third book. And I tell you, the second book, I already wrote it in 6 years already. I worked on my second book for 6 years already. And I already started on my third book, because I feel like there are so many stories from Vietnam. You know, I've talked to a lot of people, and I feel like I need to tell these stories. There's just this urgency, and I feel like, you know, our time on earth is so limited, right? And I'm just so scared what will happen tomorrow. Yes.
Thank you. And we will definitely be reading all of your books, so we can't wait for your second and your third book. I have another question for you, Quế Mai. It's also your first book in English. What was the process like writing in a different language? And do you think it changed the way you wrote? And if so, how?
Oh, thank you. So I was a translator for many years, and I did the most difficult job. I translated Vietnamese poetry. So I translated poetry from the ancient time to the modern time. And that process, you know, taught me a lot about the ability to dig deeper into each language, and also the need to retain the musicality of the Vietnamese language, because Vietnamese language is very musical, and it, you know, and so in a sense, I wrote this book in English, but with the awareness that I need to protect the authenticity of the Vietnamese setting, of the Vietnamese language, of the Vietnamese characters. They, you know, the expression is in English, but they think, they act, they speak the Vietnamese way. So, you know, so that's why proverbs are so important, because proverbs are like the pillar of the Vietnamese life. You know, for example, when I was like growing up, my 2 brothers and I were naughty, and sometimes my father would lose his patience, and my mom would say, mưa dầm thấm lâu. She would tell my father, mưa dầm thấm lâu, when he became upset. Soft and persistent rain penetrates the earth better than a storm. Then my father would say, okay, I will calm down and be the soft rain rather than be a storm, you know. So that's why I brought a lot of proverbs into the book, because they are our they are part of our daily language as well. So I think, yeah, writing it was difficult, but it was also a lot of fun. I have to use the Vietnamese English dictionary constantly, even now. And I have a notebook until now. Every day when I read, Megha, for example, when I read your book, I note down words that I don't know and their meaning. And I learned them by heart, so that, you know, I would use them later when I write, so that hopefully they come naturally to my mind when I write it.
We have a few questions in the chat, in the Q&A, so I'm going to get to those because they relate to what we're speaking about now, and then I'll end off with those questions that I have for you. This is from Nancy, and she's talking about the process that you were just describing, Quế Mai, about writing the book, but maintaining the lyricism of the Vietnamese language. And she wanted to know, were you thinking of the story in Vietnamese and translating it, or were you thinking of it in English as you were writing?
I think it's a hard question to answer. I think in a way I was both thinking in Vietnamese and English. And I've been, at the moment, because I worked for so many years as a translator, the border is blurred, you know, and I think there were moments that I had to think in Vietnamese. There were moments in the book that I had to work as a translator. For example, the diaries of Huong's mother, Ngọc, were very difficult to write. Because she's traumatized, she has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and to write these diary entries, you know, I think it took my PhD research to do that, because I had to read so many books on by traumatized veterans to know how PTSD and trauma affected their behaviors, affected their thinking. But still, because these entries were so personal, and I felt like I needed to go into the deepest part of the emotions, and I started writing in English, and then, you know, I wrote many drafts, and I felt they were not right. And one day I put everything aside and I started writing it in Vietnamese. And I started with these words, anh ơi. Anh ơi is a phrase we call our beloved, and you cannot translate. And I just wrote anh ơi, and suddenly, you know, I was flooded with emotions, and I started writing a few pages in Vietnamese first. And when I felt like I knew how it felt like to be writing this diary, you know, with the heart of this character, then I switched to English. And it was really hard. But when I read these diary entries, I tell you, I cry every time, because I know some women who were affected like that. And you know, and there is one book that I highly recommend by the Dr. Đặng Thùy Trâm. It was translated by Andrew X. Pham. So this is a diary of a doctor, which has been translated into English by Andrew X. Pham. I can't remember the name now, but it's her diaries during the you know, she worked as a doctor during the Vietnam War, and she documented her journeys, and actually she was killed. And an American soldier found her diary and brought it to the US. So many years later, this American veteran, you know, felt guilty. So he decided to look for her family to return the diary. So the diary has been, you know, so then the diary was published in Vietnam as well. And the diary found a way back to the family, and the family was just so, I mean, they were so stunned that, you know, after many years of the daughter's death, the mother got the diary back. Can you imagine? I will find that. I still need to send you the link to that book.
Oh yes, please. And we'll put that link up when we show the video of this. Kyle asks if you can share some of your favorite proverbs from the book. So I think we have time if you want to share if you have a favorite one in both English and Vietnamese. We may have lost Megha because I do not see her on screen with us right now. She was having Wi-Fi difficulties, but that's okay. We have plenty to talk about right now.
Oh, proverbs. There are so many proverbs that I love, but one of my favorites is mưa dầm thấm lâu, soft and persistent rain penetrates the earth better than a storm. Trong cái rủi có cái may. Good luck hides inside bad luck. And,
I love that.
Yeah. Đi một ngày đàn, học một sàng khôn. A day of traveling earns a basket full of wisdom. A day of traveling earns a basket full of wisdom. You know, I want to say that it took me months to translate these proverbs because I wanted to protect the essence of our culture, because, you know, a basket full of wisdom, you know, because in Vietnam we use a lot of bamboo basket. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the original Vietnamese word is sang, is the bamboo basket. So, you know, it took a lot of work to translate the proverbs, and I needed the help of two of my friends, Paul Christensen and Thanh Hà Lại. By the way, I need Thanh Hà Lại, you know, help me with the proverb. And if you're interested in Vietnamese writing, you should check out her book. She wrote this beautiful book called Inside Out and Back Again.
Inside Out and Back Again?
Yeah. And
okay, we'll have Ed and, who's helping with our tech, put that in our link right now in the chat. And
it won the National Book Award. So it's a wonderful, it's a book of you know, she wrote a book in poetry, a poetic novel. Yeah. Hi, Megha. so good to have you back.
My Wi-Fi is not cooperating this evening.
That is okay. That is okay. That's the beauty of Zoom, I guess. So we need to have some technical difficulties to make it seem like it's real. Luckily, we're recording all of this, so you can go back and listen to those wonderful proverbs. So I have a question now for both of you. Anissa says she loved both books, and for both authors, do your characters lead you or do you lead them? Does it change depending on where you are in the writing process? Shall we start with Megha?
Sure. That is such an interesting question, Anissa. I think I think it kind of goes back and forth depending on the stages, you know. Initially, I'm probably drawn to a character who appears formed in some way, and they have certain aspirations and qualities and questions that they hold within them, which appeal to me, which make me want to look closer. And so that's kind of how it starts. But then, you know, later I might find that I'm considering, let's say in a particular scene, what happens if they respond in this way rather than that way? You know, what happens if they make this choice rather than that choice? And, you know, so I feel very conscious of.
Oh no, I think we're losing Megha again. So Quế Mai, we'll move on to you, and hopefully she'll hop back in soon.
Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about the book that I was talking about, the Diary of Đặng Thùy Trâm. In Vietnamese is called Đừng Đốt, Don't Burn. So I will, let me type the name of I think the English I think the English name is called The Diary of Đặng Thùy Trâm. Okay, I type it into the text, the chat room. Oh, can you see it?
Let's see. So you need to use the drop down to go all panelists and attendees, because right now it's only the panelists seeing it.
Okay, because this book is so important and I like to recommend it to you.
I will put it in the chat right now.
Oh, here I have it. Okay, The Diary of Dang Thuy Cham, and it's translated by Andrew X. Pham. And if Andrew X. Pham wrote this amazing book called Catfish and Mandala, sorry, I cannot help but recommend all of these amazing reads. Grace, could you repeat the question again?
Oh, yes. So the question, let's see. Do your characters, when you write, do they lead you or do you lead them? And does it change depending on where you are in the writing process?
Oh, I think this is such a great question. I think there should be a combination of both. I think if you I think I have learned that we need to trust, as writers, we need to trust our characters and give them the freedom where they like to go with the story, so that in that process we can find magic through our writing. But on the other hand, we need to have some control of the plot. So one of my, actually I was doing my master's in Greek and PhD, and my writing mentor Sarah Myland, a novelist, she told me, trust. She gave me this writing exercise. So there's a scene, and to write it in one certain scene, write it four different ways, that you can go 4 different outcomes. So for example, if a character enters into the room and there's another person there, so you have to give 4 or 5 different options of what happens, and then you choose the best one. So sometimes the writers need to have control of what happened, and you have to experiment with different options and find out. And I think with my writing, I write hundreds of drafts for each book. And I think a character's action at one point leads to the next, right? And sometimes it's difficult to say what choice will the character make. And I think you have to have a deep understanding of the character to know what decision or what action makes sense. But on the other hand, you need to trust the character to develop and to grow themselves as well. So I think the answer is to balance both.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I can't believe the time is already coming to a close for this event, but if everyone is okay with just a few minutes longer, we're going to get to one last question from the audience, and then we have a few links to share that Quế Mai and Megha have already picked for us. And if you scroll through the chat, you're going to see some of their book recommendations, some Asian authors to follow, some books that brought them comfort during the pandemic, and we've provided all of those in a list, and that's there for you to look at in the chat. One last audience question. We have so many great ones. I wish we could get to them all, but Julie writes, "This is such a fantastic conversation. Many thanks to all of you. Can you speak to addressing trauma in contemporary fiction? Some editors and critics are recently wary of trauma when it comes to fiction, especially by writers of color. I understand not wanting to publish only stories of trauma, but I also think it is important not to look away from trauma. How did you consciously balance trauma and address it in your narrative?" It's a powerful question to end this portion of the discussion with.
I think we can have the whole discussion a few hours based on this question. It is so important. I think sometimes we tend to look away from difficult stories because I remember when we started pitching the book, some editors were saying this story is so hard, but I think trauma is the long-lasting impact of war and I think a lot of us suffer from trauma, and we cannot heal if we don't communalize our trauma. trauma, you know, in healing trauma, we need to communalize it. We need to talk about it openly. We need to acknowledge it. We need to share it, to have understanding, to have the feeling that we are not alone. So, you know, sharing trauma is a very important process. And I think, you know, in this way, literature has a very important role in promoting healing. You know, by encouraging people to share their trauma and talk about their trauma openly, so that they're not stigmatized by it. And I think for me, you know, I felt the need to document trauma from the Vietnamese perspective, because, you know, the official viewpoint from the Vietnamese government is that we won the Vietnam War. There is no trauma. And so, you know, so Vietnamese people are often looked at as stoic, you know, as resilient. But actually, you know, if we recognize the trauma, then we look deeper into the horror of war and the need for healing and the need for reconciliation. You know, the trauma suffered by Vietnamese people is so real. For example, you know, there are more. There have been many veterans in Vietnam who committed suicide, but we are not allowed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and also there are many Vietnamese who have fled Vietnam since and refused to go back to Vietnam. So, you know, I wanted to place the trauma of Vietnamese people on the center of this novel, to highlight the horror of war, but also to call for more healing and reconciliation. And I think we need to promote, you know, stories which are not, sometimes, you know, stories are not just for entertainment or for fun purposes. I think I venture into difficult stories because I know how much it hurts to write these type of stories. You know, I would rather write love stories or humorous stories, but I felt like, you know, there are so many things that need to be told, that need to be brought out to the surface, right? Because I think racism against the Asian communities in the US is terrible at the moment. And if the general American public, you know, read more about the trauma experienced by, you know, by you know, by our community, you will have a deeper understanding and empathy. There would be less racism. There would be more support, more understanding. So yes, you know, I think we need to confront trauma and the horror of wars and conflicts head on. Otherwise we move on and we let it unburied, and we cause, you know, then the lessons of the past are not learned. We need to learn more from lessons of the past.
Thank you. And thank you for filling your work and your life with all of this activism, with this compassion, and for lending your voice to that. And I know that so many people respect you and your work, and lending your voice to that really helps with everything in the fight. With COVID ravaging much of India right now, I know you have listed organizations and ways people can help on your social media. Can you please share with us a couple of those organizations now, and we'll add those to our chat as well.
So I have sent you some links of organizations. So I've been, you know, I'm devastated at the situation in India. I think donations is one thing, but I think, you know, developed countries should share their vaccine with the people in India. You know, send the vaccine, you know, and please send support, because I mean, it's devastating to look at the number of people who are dying, who are sick, and these are not just numbers. These are, you know, grandparents, parents, friends, family members. So I recommend Mission Oxygen, you know, and Feeding from Far, and Feeding from Far is aiming to distribute 20,000 meals each week for the very poor people. And Mission Oxygen, you know, there's a lack of oxygen for the victims of COVID in India. And on my Instagram, I also have a post with organizations that you can donate to, and you know, you can go onto the Instagram page of those organizations, and you can see what they do every day. So, you know, it's very transparent what they do. So I hope everyone can join hand because I think the pandemic cannot be defeated if one country is left behind. I think the global community have to work with other much more, you know, for us to overcome this pandemic, because, you know, no one can be left behind, because when the virus is here, we will still be suffering because it will travel. We have already seen how far it has traveled, and how it has affected many people. So we are in it together as a community.
Thank you. Those are very powerful and very true words to end this on. We can talk, I think, for hours, but just to respect everyone's time, I am going to close the event with a very heartfelt thank you to you, Quế Mai, and to Megha, who unfortunately is having technical difficulties, but we're so glad she was here with us to have this wonderful, wonderful conversation. And a huge thank you to our audience today for spending a little bit more than an hour with us and a good book. This event will soon be available on the University Bookstore YouTube channel, and you may click on the link provided to purchase a copy of The Mountain Sing with a beautifully signed bookplate enclosed. Thank you for joining us, and please check our website, social media, or sign up to our emails to hear about other upcoming events, including the fact that we will be hosting Megha for her paperback book launch of A Burning this summer. So stay tuned for more details on that. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your enthusiasm. Thank you so much, Grace, for this wonderful event and your kind moderation. Everyone, follow Grace on her Instagram. She's an incredible artist. She paints and she makes a lot of beautiful art, and you should really, you know, you will enjoy her work. I highly recommend her artwork. And thank you for supporting, you know, the university bookstore, booksellers. Indie booksellers are my hero. They have done so much to help us through this pandemic. So thank you for all your support, and yeah, and I highly recommend A Burning by Megha. So go read it if you haven't. And thank you for supporting the University Bookstore. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and I hope to see you in person when I come to the US for my physical bookstore.
Thank you. We are hoping for that too. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.